Hi there, come on in. If you're a fisherman or a hunter, you probably think that these guidebooks the DNR gives you when you buy your licenses contain the actual laws that you're supposed to abide by. Well, I defended a hunter who followed the wording of the waterfowl guide and he was arrested by a CO. I'll explain why he and we sportsmen won that case, so stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost and you're watching the February 3rd, 2005 edition of The Practical Sportsman.
From the rugged shores and woodlands of the north, it's history of copper mines and iron ore, the Great Lakes fishery. To the farmlands of the southern counties we'll look around, my friend, and all that waits the sportsman in the state of Michigan. And sometimes when the moon brings out the diamonds in the snow, and the stillness of the forest lies encased in Arctic cold, the wind might whisper through the trees, listen if you can. It tells you all the beauty in the state of Michigan.
Editor Bill Parker has a front page story on a new Michigan state record for wild turkey. The longest beard on record is now 16 inches. The old record was 15.1 inches, but this Monroe County gobbler, taken by Rick Garrett from Temperance, is now on top. He got it on May 27, 2004 on private land in Monroe County, 4 days before the season ended last spring. The bird weighed 21.7 pounds, had 1.5-inch spurs, a 16-inch beard that tops the record books, plus a 5.5-inch beard for good measure. And speaking of big critters, there's a picture on the front page of Kelly Drodzak of Charlotte, who got a very large coyote on Thanksgiving Day, 54 pounds. Coyotes have become more common every year throughout Michigan, and they're the predator that can conceivably threaten adult wild turkeys. There's been a big concern in the past decade over the number of new species that have come into Michigan waters, like gobies and zebra mussels, or through the air like cormorants and gypsy moths, or over the land like coyotes and critters that have escaped from pens. Too many of these non-native creatures have become major problems in the environment. In January, the DNR Commission passed a new regulation that allows hunters to take what they call free-ranging exotics in the southern third of the state year-round. Hunters aren't allowed the same regulation in the northern two-thirds of the state. These exotics include elk, red deer, and various red deer hybrids that have escaped from fenced-in herds. It also includes sika deer, fallow deer, and mule deer. These species can be killed year-round by citizens as long as the animal is not visibly marked as being from a captive herd and is free-ranging outside of a perimeter fence. The DNR regulations have a few other twists, but basically the regulation is designed to keep animals from captive herds from establishing themselves in the wild or causing problems of any type in the environment. Well, details on these articles and more can be found in the Michigan Outdoor News, which is available on the newsstand or by subscription.
This Sportsman in the Law feature is going to be longer than most, but what I'm going to explain to you is tremendously significant to sportsmen in Michigan. None of the footage you're going to see here is from this court case that I'm going to be talking about, but we're going to run this video to illustrate the situation, which centers around a duck hunter named Paige Brousseau, longtime Michigan hunter from Burton, who's now retired, spends a lot of time hunting ducks. He decided to hunt the opening day of Michigan's Southern Zone waterfowl season on a pond that is on state land. This pond is not connected to Saginaw Bay, but it's pretty close. This particular pond is in a popular area, and on the Friday before the Saturday opener, hunting parties were in that pond by early afternoon. See, hunting season didn't start until the next morning, a half hour before daylight, but the hunters knew that well before then, all the good spots would be taken. So these various hunting parties camped out in their boats and on the shore to secure their locations for the next morning. Now, Paige Brousseau and his buddies were in a boat. They were just offshore from their spot, and they decided after dark they might as well set out their decoys because they're going to spend the night in the boat among the decoys. They knew it was against the law to set up decoys and leave them unattended overnight, but they believed as long as they were there with their decoys, they wouldn't be leaving them in violation of the law. So the sun goes down, it's 9:50 p.m., and who shows up but Officer Friendly, who arrests Paige for the decoy violation, gives him the ticket, and makes the hunters take their decoys out of the water. He told them that they could put them back in the water at 3 a.m. Now, that didn't make a lot of sense to Paige. He argued with the officer, got the ticket, a few days later called me. I ended up filing a motion to dismiss this ticket. My argument was that Paige's arrest was unconstitutional because the way the law was worded in the Michigan Waterfowl Hunting Guide, which Paige and other hunters believe is the law, well, it's actually not how the actual DNR order is worded. And the prosecutor was prosecuting Paige Brousseau on the wording of the order and not on the wording of the Waterfowl Guide. Now, I argued to the court that the DNR represents to the public that all of their hunting and fishing guides contain the laws for hunting and fishing. And sportsmen rely on these as being accurate. The problem is, these hunting and fishing guides are not accurate. They're not the complete statements of the law. They're summaries of some of the laws that use different wordings than are in the actual laws. Now, for example, let's take the 1999 Michigan Waterfowl Hunting Guide. This is one of many that Paige Brousseau had read and relied on over the years. Now, if you look in here, there's 16 pages of charts, graphs, tables, rules, and the law we're talking about is right here under decoys, blinds, raised platforms. It says, you may not leave decoys set out overnight in waters of the Great Lakes and connecting waters and lakes wholly enclosed by publicly owned lands. Now, for years, everybody knew you couldn't leave the decoys in the marsh at the end of the day and come back the next morning to claim that area because your decoys were there holding the spot. That's what waterfowl hunters have always thought leaving decoys meant. But in 2002, the law was changed from using the word overnight to using the words between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. in waters of the Great Lakes and connecting waters. Okay, so overnight now is changed to 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., but since all the other wording of the regulation is the same, doesn't it seem logical that the intent of the law would remain the same? But what the DNR wrote in the Waterfowl Guide, unfortunately, is not what the DNR wrote in the actual order. Because the order says, believe it or not, this is a screwy way to say it, but in the taking of migratory birds, it shall be unlawful for any person, except from 3 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily, which of course is a backwards way of saying from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., to anchor, attach, or leave decoys attached to the bottom lands of the Great Lakes and connecting waters and lakes wholly enclosed by publicly owned lands, or B, to a blind or watercraft, blah, blah, blah. Well, you get the idea. But notice that word anchor appears to refer to the bottom lands under subsection A, while attach appears to refer to being tied to a blind or a watercraft in subsection B. In other words, attached to a boat. Now, you're probably saying, oh, come on, Trost, this is just a word game. Where are you going with this? Well, that's right, it is a word game. Laws are made of words, and the meanings of the words are critical because the words define what's legal and what's illegal. Now, the conservation officer who wrote the ticket used a different word on the ticket than is used in the hunting guide or is used in the DNR order. He said the violation was to place decoys on public waters between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. The words place, placing, placed, they aren't in the DNR order, and they're not in the hunting guide. And besides, you only place the decoys once. And the Brousseau party didn't place the decoys between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. They placed them in the water earlier than that. So the ticket said that the infraction involved placing the decoys at the prohibited time. The Michigan Waterfowl Guide said you can't leave decoys set out. And the actual DNR order said it's illegal to anchor, attach, or leave decoys attached. Now, there's obviously a difference between an anchored decoy and an attached decoy because the order uses both words. If a decoy is tied to a string that is tied to a weight that rests on the bottom, then that decoy is anchored, but it's not attached to the bottom of the lake. You attach the decoy to a blind or a boat. Now, the order clearly says you can't leave the decoys attached, but it doesn't say you can't leave the decoys anchored. If the DNR Commission meant the word leave to apply to anchoring, they would have written the order to say you can't anchor, attach, or leave decoys anchored or attached. But it doesn't say anything about leaving decoys anchored. It just says you can't leave them attached to a blind or a watercraft. Now, I know this sounds tedious and nitpicky, but what difference does it all make? Well, every fish and game regulation is a criminal misdemeanor. They stay on your record. You might have to declare these misdemeanors on job applications. They aren't civil infractions like traffic tickets. Fish and game violations are full-fledged crimes with up to 90 days of jail time, fines, costs, restitution. You could forfeit your equipment, lose your hunting or fishing privileges, especially if you have several of these misdemeanors on your record. So when the DNR writes different words in their orders than they publish in their hunting and fishing guides, and the COs even write different words on their tickets, how does anybody know what the law really says? Well, let me get to the punchline. Here's what Tuscola County District Court Judge Kim Glaspie said from the bench after hearing the prosecutor's arguments and my arguments. He said the issue here is if Mr. Brusso has his decoys set out at 10:50 p.m. and he's got them attached, which I'm not sure whether he does or not, according to the citation it says placed. Again, that language isn't found anywhere, not in the statute, not in the guide, but the statute's pretty clear. And I think in this case, Mr. Brusso was reasonable in his interpretation of the guide. I think the guide creates a notice or information that is vague to the waterfowl hunter, makes no mention of anchoring or attaching. These decoys weren't left unattended either. They were left attended. And I think all of that creates a vagueness and confusion that's created by the department. They put out the guide. And therefore, I don't think the hundreds of thousands of hunters that rely on those guides, that should be to their detriment. That is, that they follow the guide and a reasonable interpretation of the guide or a literal interpretation of the guide in this case. So having found all that, I'll order this case dismissed. Yes, under the Constitution, you as a citizen can't be prosecuted for a law that's vague or confusing, or if a law is written clearly but you don't have notice of it, and you're not told or you don't have an opportunity or you're misdirected as to what the law says or means, then it's not constitutional. It's not American to be prosecuted for something a reasonable person couldn't clearly understand. Now, the prosecutor in Tuscola County wasn't happy with Judge Glaspie's well-reasoned opinion, so he filed an appeal with the Tuscola County Circuit Court, where Judge Patrick Jocelyn said, in short, that Paige Brusso reasonably relied on the guide issued by the DNR as a fair and accurate representation of the laws and regulations for hunting waterfowl in Michigan. And Brusso did not leave the decoys in violation of the guidelines. Judge Jocelyn added that when a hunter complies with hunting guidelines published by the DNR, then the hunter is free to rely on those guidelines without fear of breaking the law. This, my friends, is huge. It's a huge victory for sportsmen in Michigan because, at least in Tuscola County, the court said that sportsmen can rely on the wording put in the guides that are published by the DNR as stating the law accurately, even though you now know that these guides oftentimes don't. But that's the DNR's problem, not our problem as license buying sportsmen. when the scale of justice tips in favor of the practical sportsman. And this time we can thank Judge Glaspie and Judge Jocelyn in Tuscola County for being fair and balanced in what too often boils down to a confusing word game that the everyday citizen and the practical sportsman doesn't really understand. Mike Marciniak from Dearborn Heights came all the way over here to our neck of the woods in Eaton County, but you were bow hunting at the end of October, and you got a 10-pointer.
That's correct.
Andy.
The 14th, morning of the 14th, actually, I was videoing him, shooting video, and the night before I told my stepson and my partner and his friends, you got to stick around Monday morning, and I shot him out of my stepson's stand. I put it at a nice spot. What you do is try to set everybody up so they can have a good time. Mm-hmm. And I said, you better stick around. And he says, well, I got to go. I'm not going to take the day off. So he made a mistake. I called him in at 200 yards with a grunt, and I was just videoing because he just kept coming, and I zeroed in with the telephoto.
Now, did you have a grunt call that you could use while you were, so you didn't have to use your hands?
I let it hang down. And I was more concerned about shooting video because I thought, well, he was eating with a doe. And I says, here he comes. And then I realized that I've been watching this guy for 3 years. Same one. I says, he's going to get close. So it's either shoot the camera, zoom in and play with it, bend over, or get the bow ready. So we decided we'll just let the camera roll. And he came in, I got him on film. The thing is, I wasn't after him, I was after his daddy.
So is this your own property there in Eaton County?
It's a family farm.
And you kind of coordinate it?
Yeah, I bring my partner and his sons up. We set them up with stands in good places, which are they usually get the good viewing. I usually play cameraman. Mm-hmm. So this was reward.
Well, but I mean, you enjoy that obviously somewhat more than hunting because...
Oh, the camera's great, especially the fights. I got him a 5 and a 6. And him walking around a 5 and a 6 fighting all previous years. I kept seeing him. But his father is a monster. And I wanted the father, but I thought, well, you got to wait.
So if the father would have come in, you would have put the camera down?
And no, the camera was on a tree. I just had to bend over and look through the viewfinder or, zero in, zoom in or grab the bow. When I saw these at 30 feet away, I figured it's time for the bow. Mm-hmm. So made a nice shot. He went in, and thanks to my partner, he played the amateur cameraman, and we had a good time.
Super.
But there still is Big Daddy out there. So as long as he makes lots of babies, that's what counts.
That's right. You know how they do that? You know about chasing the does?
It's something like a lottery.
Yeah, something like that anyway. Well, good. Mike Marciniak from Dearborn Heights. That is super. This is a fish caught by Ken Piggott III. Lake St. Clair, 52.5-inch Great Lakes muskie. You were trolling in the afternoon, early in September. Man, that's a bruiser there. What'd you do with it?
It was catch and release. It's third in the state for 2003.
You mean for adults, kids, and everybody?
Mm-hmm.
That's outstanding. Well, you're a scout.
Yep.
How far are you in scouting?
Well, first class. I just can't find the badge yet.
Oh, okay. You got it somewhere, but you're going to have your patch for Master Angler and all that.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. How long you been fishing?
I usually used to fish at my grandpa's place up in Coldwater, but then he moved to Las Vegas.
Oh. So you go out and visit him?
We did once.
Did? Because you can walk around those casinos now, Yeah. Well, I guess I don't tell you about casinos in Michigan anymore. But that's a Great Lakes muskie. That's a super one. Was that on your dad's boat or what?
It was a charter.
Wow.
Uncle Dean had to help me reel it in.
Is this Uncle Dean?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, good, Uncle Dean. That sounded like quite a project. For the third largest in the state, catch and release, congratulations. Ken Piggott III from Texas.
Take your portable TV ice fishing this weekend so you won't miss the Super Bowl while you're ice fishing. Have a safe weekend outdoors, and we'll see you right back here next week.